Hey, it's Dave here with the August 2021 episode of Built From Scratch. And I've got a few things to cover here, so I need to get on with it. I'm supposed to be heading home in about 10 minutes. I'm going to struggle to squeeze that in. But the first thing I've got to tell you is that this is actually going to be the last episode of Built From Scratch that comes out with any kind of in a regular format. I'm fairly sure it's not going to be the last ever one, but it will just be as and when I've actually got something to say from now on. I'll get back to that in a second, but secondly, I'll go with the figures, as I always like to do at the start. And I've got to tell you that this month's income has been one of two figures, depending on how you want to look at it. I could argue it's been about £100, or I could argue it's been specifically 10 pence. I'll explain that in a second too, but first, just to note the traffic for the .site, the sessions have been 101. I'm cheating ever so slightly there because that's actually for August plus the first 7 days of September. I'm recording this on the 8th of September, and I figure since I'm not going to do one for a while, potentially, I may as well just give the figures up to today's date. So that's 101 sessions over a month and a week. And I did just quickly check, because I've been working on the site a bit these last few weeks. I just wanted to check that wasn't all just me, because I never have got round to filtering my own IP address out. Well, plus, come to think of it, I actually work off a mobile phone, not a static IP, so I'm not sure if I can even do that. I guess my IP address probably changes every time I turn this on. Anyway, I just went back to January of this year just to compare the figures. In January I had 81 sessions but only 11 new users, whereas these last 5 weeks I had 101 sessions and 54 new users. So clearly some of those sessions were me, but the majority weren't, and there has been a genuine uptick there. The .co.uk sessions, I didn't actually bother checking. I suspect they're basically zero, and that's because it's been months really now since I've actually updated that site. One of the many things I've learnt this year is that if you are working to a tight... basically, if you're struggling for spare time, then trying to work on two sites at the same time is probably not a good idea, basically. Even if there are some efficiencies to be gained by copying stuff between the two of them. Not a great idea, so I haven't been doing it for a while. Okay, so to talk about the income before I tell you about the what's going on in general. The £100 that I mentioned represents 5 projector stand sales, which is what I've had. But that experiment has gone awfully, it has to be said. Of all the things I've done in this last year, this little dipping of a toe in the waters of the Amazon has been the worst bit. I don't think that's due to incompetence on my part. I'm actually fairly happy. If I look at my listing, I think it looks pretty decent. The product is kind of low end of the quality spectrum, but then I've priced it accordingly. I think that what's been going on is simply that the shipping crisis, which is gripping the world of retail ever more tightly at the moment, has just destroyed my ability to earn money with this with this one product line. Essentially, to give you in numbers what's gone on, it's cost me about £27, I think, in total to have each of these units, which is a little bit because of one-off costs. Like, for example, I've had to register a trademark which cost a couple of £100, but it's mostly because of the exorbitant fees I had to pay to actually bring the stands to the UK. So I've paid £27 a unit, and I reckon their market value in normal times is probably only around £22-23, so there's a loss there already, which is kind of acceptable. If you're definitely starting up an e-commerce business, you might have to just lose a bit up front to build things up, fair enough. but I'm not really doing that. I thought this would be quite, naively, I thought this would be quite a fast and easy way of earning a little bit of cash to help build up the rest of the site. So I'm not really in it for the long haul necessarily, and so that's been a bit of a knock. But what has then added to that is that it would seem that doing paid ads on Amazon is a pretty expensive business. I set up various campaigns. They all worked to some small degree, but small, and the cost of them was substantial, to the point where my return on ad spend on the worst campaigns was actually less than 1, which means I was paying more in advertising fees than I was able to sell the stands for, like top line revenue. So that's, in other words, I'm losing money just because of the advertising costs. That's before you take into account the £27 per unit that I've paid to get them. So that's been a disaster, and I've stopped it all now. So I'm just going to hold on to those stands until I find a better way of getting rid of them, basically. So the £100 that I've got is, I'm not counting it as revenue or anything. It's just to be forgotten about as a temporarily failed experiment. And I'd actually rather concentrate on the 10p that I've earned, because I earned that by through Amazon Associates, through an actual affiliate link being clicked on the site, and then someone bought something, a phone charger I believe it was, on Amazon, and I received, into my Amazon Associates account there has been placed 10p worth of potentially payable commissions. So I'm actually, if the general vibe at the moment wasn't kind of pretty negative, I'd be pretty stoked about that, because that's the first ever pure online money I've ever earned. So it really feels like it's broken through probably the main barrier, and that's great. So I was just having a quick think earlier about what that makes the site worth now. And of course, it's a content site, so you can probably apply something like a 40-month multiplier to it. You take that 10p, and therefore it's worth £4. Obviously, if I was going to sell it, Empire Flippers maybe, they take a 15% cut, so that's going to be 60p for those greedy bar stewards. Leaving me £3.40. So for this year's work, I've possibly earned £3.40. So what else do I actually need to talk about? I'll tell you a quick bit about, I really do need to pack this in and leave actually, but I'll tell you a quick bit about, firstly, that quite apart from the site sessions actually genuinely going up, there's a bit of other positive news from Ahrefs, which is showing that the .site is now ranking for about 35 phrases, about 10 of which are on page 1 in the US, albeit kind of between 5th and 10th place. There's nothing in the sort of top 1 or 2 places yet, but still, that's pretty good, and it's all come in the last couple of months. Well, not all, the majority of it has come in the last couple of months, and if you look at the graph, it's really, whilst it's only, and I appreciate this is very, very small numbers we're still talking about, it is quite a nice looking graph at the moment. So, despite those sort of small initial bits of good news, Built from Scratch is, like I said, something that is becoming something that I'll just do when I have something to talk about, and that is because the entire wave to the project is getting sidelined, basically. It's definitely not getting shut down, but I'm going to finish a few things off, and then it's going to just be left to look after itself indefinitely, and it could be for quite a long time. So if I'm getting a few signs of life, the obvious question is why is now the time to sideline it? And I've left myself a couple of notes here. There's 2 basic reasons. On a positive outlook, there's the fact that I think I mentioned in the written part of the site, that I recently bought an affiliate site. That kind of feels a little bit like cheating, but I'll explain why. Basically, part 2 of this rationale makes it pretty obvious why I had to do that. I bought an affiliate site. It's the full package. It's been running for a couple of years. It's got a reasonable bit of authority, and it's got quite a large amount of fairly nice articles. It's earning a bit of money, like 3 figures a month. Not enough to live on, but certainly it means it is well established. So if I go and work on that site, any efforts I make in terms of creating content are going to be amplified in a way that they absolutely won't at the moment with Wave. Secondly, and this very much ties in with, well, this is the crux of the situation at the moment, is that I'm pretty much out of cash now for living expenses. I've got maybe a couple of months left, which is the type of amount where really it's time to start making plans for the next step. Really, I'm not just going to see out those couple of months and then fall off a cliff edge. So I'm kind of at the end of things in a sense. So I don't have a great deal of choice. I need to work on something that is going to immediately earn money and or start looking for a job, basically. So the time that I do have left, apart from actually potentially filling out a few job applications, going for interviews and whatnot, I'm going to be spending on the site that is up and running and could potentially earn some money. I've spoken to my wife about it, and we've decided that if I can get the other site to show some improvement in the next couple of months, then that might justify holding off getting a job to actually just carry on working on that site and see if we can get to the point where it's becomes a salary, before we have to sort of borrow money just to pay for living expenses, which we really don't want to do. So that might happen, but if that's not the case, if it stays kind of successful, like earning money but fairly flat, then I'll just be off to get a job, which is not the worst thing in the world. In fact, that's a kind of reason 3 actually for the shelving of Wave, is that I've now been working by myself for a year, and I've enjoyed some aspects of it, but I'm a reasonably social kind of person, and I kind of do miss working around other people, and I guess I would have options like a co-working space, but that's not quite the same, I don't think. So there is me going and applying for jobs is not all stick. There's a little bit of carrot there too. I actually don't mind the idea of doing that. So this Wave experiment is not all over. The ongoing costs of running the site are negligible. It's just the domain name and the hosting, which amounts to whatever it is, £20-30 a year. So I'm definitely going to keep it going and just watch how it performs with me not working on it anymore. Because of the upward trends in traffic and whatnot at the moment, there is reason to believe it might just continue to gain a little bit and get somewhere without me helping it any further. I have been adding some quite good quality content recently, so you never know. Also, I am going to still be adding another page to advertise the remaining 98 projector stands. So it is possible that if that gets even just a trickle of traffic, it could add a bit of value that makes me kind of keep coming back to it from that point of view too. Okay, so before I head off, I'm just going to quickly talk about what I've actually been doing this month, which is that I have completed the written versions of the single product reviews. That took really quite a lot of work actually. I ended up putting some considerable effort into the layout of the page, which I kind of didn't really want to do because I just needed to wrap things up quickly and move on. But you know the way things go when you're going to do something, especially when it's going to be out in the public domain, and if it's going to try and achieve some kind of commercial intent, then you always end up wanting to do a good job. So I did put some time into that, and then actually just writing the content, despite the fact that I'd already recorded the videos and done all the research and had all the knowledge there, just writing it out took a while. But that's finished now. I have also I've also bought a domain to do with projectors, which was no longer needed by the person who had it. It was just a cheap one, it cost me a couple of £100. It doesn't have huge authority, but it had a couple of nice links coming into it from some sites that did have some authority, and it's specifically to do with projectors, so it was quite a nice fit. So I bought it, and I've just done a sort of lazy whole site 301 redirect to Wave to the dot site. The amount of authority that site had is low enough, well, so low I should say, that I'm really not sure if it's going to have much impact on Wave in terms of link equity being passed. But it had a little bit of traffic go into it, and well, whatever, you get what I'm saying. It's worth a little experiment just for a little bit of money. So what I actually now plan to do, because I'm not quite finished working on Wave, is that I want to I've got to put together the page of written content for the best projector stand video. That needs writing up properly. That shouldn't take too long, because that is mostly just, in fact, pretty much the written content for that page might be little more than a table explaining what the single product reviews said in brief, and then with the video. So I'll do that. I've got to make sure that all the affiliate links are in place and correct. That is something that I've learned requires a fair bit of management. It's very easy to get that wrong. And that I also want all internal links that I want to be there, need to be there, and that's going to include putting together the right kind of sidebar. That is going to be about it though. Then just have a general check that everything looks right, and then I'm going to be leaving it. So the last thing I'm going to say is that the only other thing I'm considering doing before moving forward is to write up this year's worth of Built From Scratch as a document of, a first year of sort of entrepreneurial work, very much with a slant of failure up to this point. It has to be said, because that's what it has largely been. Albeit, I suppose I can sort of hold my head high, no, not high, but kind of 10% up from completely low, and say that whilst it's pretty much been a failure, it's not actually over, so I guess until it's over, the failure isn't kind of locked in. And also because there are some signs of life in the last few weeks, fingers crossed, I can honestly say it may actually still go somewhere good in the future. But basically it's been a failure, and I may invest the time in writing that up to see if I can put it out into the world, with a view to potentially generating a bit of interest in a few links. There would be a sweet irony if the first article that I actually wrote with a view to pushing out into the world in a bit of a PR kind of way was all about the failure of the project, and that in itself generated some success. That would be kind of cool. But that would actually take a fair bit of time to do, and as I've already stated, really putting more time into this at the moment is really not what I want to do, so I'll have to have a big think about that. It will probably depend on how quickly I get the other jobs wrapped up, to see whether I want to invest what would probably be at least a couple of days into writing that article, and then probably some more time pushing it out there. I say at least, it's the type of thing that could take days or even weeks, although it's also the kind of thing where, because this is like a story that I just know is, because I've been living it for the last year, I could probably write rapidly and well, so maybe it won't take too long, I don't know, we'll see. So that's pretty much going to be it for now, although I have just thought, the very last thing I just want to mention is, if anyone is watching this, if you happen to have watched any of the videos nearer the start of this series, I spoke a couple of times about where I was at with the amount of money that I had to put towards this project and how long I thought that would buy me. And that changed 2 or 3 times over time, and it kind of changed how long I had, and therefore what I thought I should and shouldn't be working on. The kind of summary of that situation is that I ended up having an awful lot less to spend on it than I initially thought. But what the rest of that money has been put to that wasn't spent on Wave was essentially a large part of building an extension on the house that me and my wife and our now 3 children live in. So that's great because it's bought us a nice house that we're going to live in happily for many years. And it's also been put towards the fact that we've paid off some personal debt, so we're kind of living pretty much debt free now, and everything in our household is feeling fairly, financially calm, and that is very nice. And the reason I'm saying that is because not to try and say this hasn't been a failure, because it basically still has, but because I feel like I do kind of need to explain why I haven't put as much time into this as I thought I would, but also because the fact that things are now going to be pretty plain sailing, financially speaking, in life in general, I think increases the chances that at some point in the not too distant future, I might get back to being able to spend a bit of time or potentially a little bit of money on working on Wave. So it's definitely not going away forever. And well, I promise you this, at the very, very least, I will do one more video wrapping things up completely. I mean, shutting things down, if it ever gets to the point where I'm shutting it down. Okay, bye for now.